Fishing was supposed to be peaceful, until we realized we weren't alone in the water. Tonight, I'm sharing 3 terrifying encounters that prove sometimes the thing you're trying to catch is actually hunting you. Story 1, my brother and I discovered this isolated lake years ago, hidden deep in the woods, accessible only through overgrown trails that kept most people away. That isolation? It felt like our own private sanctuary. We'd spend countless hours there, just the 2 of us, pulling bluegill after bluegill from waters that seemed almost too generous. Those early days created a fishing obsession that's consumed most of my life. The lake's reputation kept crowds away. Most locals considered it too remote, too much effort for what it offered. But that's exactly what we loved about it. The eerie silence, the way shadows danced across the water, the feeling that we'd stumbled onto something that didn't want to be found. Everyone knows fish bite best during twilight hours, dawn or dusk, when darkness begins its crawl across the water. Most fishermen prefer dawn, but my brother and I, we chose something darker. We'd arrive as sunset painted the sky blood red, staying long after darkness swallowed everything around us. It was our twisted alternative to whatever normal teenagers did on Friday nights. This particular Friday started like any other. We reached our spot just as the sun began its descent, and by the time our lines hit the water, shadows were already stretching like grasping fingers across the lake's surface. Our usual perch, a formation of rocks jutting out into the water, felt different that night. Colder, more exposed. We'd done this hundreds of times before, but this time, something was terribly wrong. As darkness crept in around us, movement on the far shore caught my attention. The water was churning, violent ripples spreading outward in patterns that made my stomach drop. I grabbed JJ's arm, pointing across the lake. Through the gathering darkness, we both stared, trying to make sense of what we were seeing. The lake was massive, and visibility was dying with the light. But those ripples, they were too deliberate, too powerful to be anything natural. Then it happened. Something I'll never forget, no matter how desperately I try. A dark shape began emerging from the depths where those ripples had been. As it rose, slow and deliberate, my brain tried to rationalize it. A massive fish breaking the surface, maybe a log floating up from the bottom. But as more of it appeared, that hope shattered like glass. It was too large, too vertical, too impossibly human. The realization hit us simultaneously. I heard my brother's curse at the exact moment the word died on my own lips. A person, an actual human being, standing in the middle of that isolated lake, miles from anywhere, rising from depths they'd been submerged in for. How long? My heart hammered against my ribs. Every nerve in my body screamed to run, to get away from whatever wrongness was unfolding before us. But my brother insisted we'd just arrived, that whoever, whatever, that was couldn't possibly affect us from so far away. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. We watched, hypnotized and horrified, as the figure began swaying. Not the jerky, erratic movements you'd expect from someone treading water. No, these movements were smooth, rhythmic, almost serpentine, like they weren't fighting the water at all, like they were commanding it, bending it to their will with each fluid motion. Our fishing poles lay forgotten on the rocks. We couldn't look away. The figure continued its hypnotic dance, swaying back and forth in the darkness, and with each passing second, the wrongness of it all burrowed deeper into my bones. Could they be fishing? Impossible. Who fishes underwater after sunset in the middle of nowhere? JJ suggested a night swim, but when I dipped my hand in the water, I yanked it back immediately. The cold burned. You'd have to be insane, or something far worse, to willingly submerge yourself in water that cold. I finally broke from my trance, urging my brother to do the same. We needed to ignore this, to focus on why we came here. But when I turned to him, terror seized my throat. JJ sat motionless, mouth hanging open, eyes locked on the figure across the lake. He wasn't even holding his fishing pole anymore. It had fallen beside him, forgotten. I called his name once, twice, 3 times, each time more desperate than the last, before he finally snapped out of whatever spell had gripped him. His hands shook as he picked up his pole. He muttered an apology, but I could see it in his eyes. He was terrified. We were both terrified. We tried fishing again, but it was pointless. Every cast, every reel felt mechanical, automatic. Our attention was elsewhere, pulled by an invisible thread toward that dark figure still swaying in the distance. Minutes crawled by like hours. I kept expecting them to move, to swim to shore, to do something that made sense, but they just stood there, conducting their eerie dance in the freezing darkness. Then JJ's hand clamped down on my shoulder. Look, the figure was descending back into the water, slowly, deliberately, They sank beneath the surface until nothing remained but ripples spreading across black water. I found myself staring at the empty spot, waiting. 30 seconds passed, a minute, still nothing. That's when I noticed JJ had pulled out his phone, stopwatch running. As it ticked past 2 minutes, my astonishment turned to dread. No one holds their breath that long, not without training, not in water that cold. JJ whispered something about Olympic training, and I almost laughed. The idea of someone practicing in this godforsaken lake seemed absurd. Then the laugh died in my throat. I started grabbing our gear, voice tight with panic. We're leaving, now. But JJ held up his hand, eyes glued to his phone. Wait, I need to see how long they can stay under. The stopwatch kept climbing. 2.5 minutes, 2:45. My hands shook as I packed our equipment, that primal urge to flee growing stronger with each passing second. Then, just before the 3-minute mark, I saw them. Ripples forming in the water again. Only this time, they were much, much closer. 1/5 of the distance instead of all the way across. The realization hit me like ice water in my veins. This thing, this person, had not only held their breath for nearly 3 minutes in freezing water, but had swum toward us while doing it, moving through the dark depths with purpose. With intent, I screamed at JJ to move. This time, he didn't argue. We both jumped to our feet, gear abandoned in our panic to leave. But we couldn't go, not yet. That terrible curiosity, that need to understand, rooted us in place. The figure rose again, closer now, close enough to see clearly in the dying light. My entire understanding of the situation shattered. It was a woman. Young, maybe our age or slightly older. Long brown hair plastered to her head, wearing what looked like a dark green swimsuit. And despite everything, despite the wrongness, the impossibility, the creeping horror of it all, she was beautiful. That beauty terrified me more than anything else. Suddenly, I felt foolish. Had we overreacted? Was this just some eccentric girl enjoying an evening swim? The fear that had gripped me moments ago began to loosen its hold. That was my first mistake. She smiled, a slow, predatory smile that made my blood run cold, and called out, "Hi." The word was playful, teasing, like she hadn't just performed an impossible feat in water that should have killed her. Like this was all perfectly normal. My brother and I stood frozen, words dying in our throats. JJ managed to choke out a question. "What are you doing?" I had to remind myself that despite her harmless appearance, everything about this situation was wrong. Dangerously wrong. She tilted her head back, water streaming down her face. "Swimming, obviously," JJ said, finding his voice. "But, are you training for something?" Another smile, wider this time, showing too many teeth. "Something like that." Then she glided closer. Not swam. Glided, moving through the water with that same unnatural grace that had first caught our attention. "Want to join me?" she asked, her voice honey-sweet and poisonous all at once. The invitation hung in the air like a curse. I finally found my voice, trying to inject normalcy into the nightmare. "Are you insane? The water's freezing," she laughed. A sound that should have been pleasant, but instead sent spiders crawling up my spine. "Babies, you'd get used to it fast enough." JJ refused. Her expression changed instantly. The playful smile vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. She brought one finger to her lips, head tilted at an unnatural angle, studying us like specimens in a jar. Maybe it was that predatory look, or the way the moonlight caught her eyes, reflecting them back like an animal's. But suddenly every alarm in my body was screaming. Questions flooded my mind. Who was she? Was she alone? How long had she been out here? Did she live nearby? But I didn't ask any of them. Instead, I grabbed JJ's shoulder and spoke the only words that mattered. "We're leaving." I expected her to swim away, to shrug off our rejection, maybe even to threaten us. I never expected her to start screaming. "No!" The word tore from her throat at impossible volume, echoing across the water and through the trees. I stumbled backward, nearly losing my footing on the rocks. We grabbed our gear in a blind panic and ran, but she didn't stop screaming. She kept calling after us, her voice growing more desperate, more enraged with each step we took. "Come back! Get in the water! Come back!" Then the screaming changed. No more words, just raw, inhuman shrieking. The kind of sound you hear in nightmares, the sound of someone being murdered, or something far worse. We were halfway to the car and I could still hear her. Those shrieks chased us through the darkness, bouncing off trees, seeming to come from everywhere at once. Part of me kept expecting to hear splashing behind us, to feel her cold hands grabbing our ankles. Was she following? Had she climbed out of the water? I didn't look back. I couldn't. By the time we reached the car, JJ already had his phone out, calling the police. He explained what happened, but when they asked us to stay for questioning, he refused, told them we didn't feel safe, then hung up. I would have done the exact same thing. The terror coursing through my veins demanded distance. Miles and miles of distance between us and that lake. You'd think an experience like that would have ended our fishing trips there forever. It did for a while, but memory is strange. Time dulls even the sharpest horror. We eventually went back, though for the first several trips, we brought our dad. It took considerable effort to convince him our story was true, but his curiosity eventually won out. We never saw her again. The lake returned to its peaceful solitude, and part of me wondered if the police had found her, dealt with whatever madness had possessed her. It became a shared joke between us over the years. We'd laugh about the lake girl, making light of that night. Eventually, we even admitted, quietly, secretly, that a small part of us wanted to see her again, just to prove it had really happened, to confirm we hadn't shared some fever dream. But now, with distance and clarity, I recognized the truth. What happened that night wasn't funny. It wasn't a story to laugh about over beers. It was a brush with something deeply, fundamentally wrong. She was probably just mentally ill. That's the logical explanation I've settled on, the one that lets me sleep at night. My brother has other theories, darker theories that I dismiss as paranoid fantasy. But sometimes, late at night when sleep won't come, I remember her smile. Those gliding movements through impossibly cold water. The way she held her breath for minutes at a time. The inhuman shrieking that followed us through the darkness. And I wonder if maybe, just maybe, my brother's theories aren't so crazy after all. Story 2. My name's Jay, and fishing isn't just a hobby for me, it's an obsession. Lakes, rivers, the sprawling Louisiana marshes. I'm on the water every chance I get. But 2 months ago, something happened that's made me question whether I'll ever feel safe out there again. My friend Angel is just as hooked on fishing as I am. When we decided to hit the marshes for speckled trout, we knew the drill. Shallow waters meant taking my 2-person kayak. Early spring kept temperatures low, with water cold enough to steal your breath, but neither of us cared. We'd done this dozens of times. After 30 minutes of paddling, we found our spot. The marsh stretched around us in every direction. Empty, isolated, exactly how we preferred it. We cracked open some beers and cast our lines, settling into that perfect fishing rhythm. An hour in, Angel hooked something substantial. As he reeled it in, excitement got the better of him. He leaned over the kayak's edge for a better angle, and I saw what was about to happen a split second before it did. His phone slid from his jacket pocket and disappeared into the murky water with a quiet splash. Angel's frustration exploded immediately. Sure, insurance covered damage, but not complete loss. Replacement would cost hundreds he didn't have. I understood completely. Money was tight for both of us. We'll find it, I promised. Though the water was so turbid you couldn't see past a few inches down. We spent 20 minutes prodding the marsh bottom with our paddles, searching blindly through mud and vegetation. With every passing minute, our confidence eroded. We weren't even sure we were looking in the right spot anymore. Finally, I told him the truth. We're not finding it, man. Let's just try to salvage the day. But Angel shook his head, jaw set with determination. I'm not leaving without that phone. Before I could stop him, he started stripping off his shoes and pants. I'm going in, he announced. I'll feel around with my feet. It actually wasn't a terrible idea, better than blindly poking with paddles. But as Angel stepped into the water, curses poured from his mouth. The cold was vicious. The spot was deeper than expected. About 4.5 feet, judging by where the waterline hit Angel's chest. But he was committed now, moving slowly through the marsh, toes probing the muddy bottom. I watched from the kayak, impatience building. The cold would force him out soon. He either needed to find that phone quickly or admit defeat. Then, everything went wrong. Angel's scream cut through the stillness, raw and primal. His entire body pitched forward, and he vanished beneath the surface in an instant. At first, I thought he'd slipped, maybe even found the phone and dove to grab it, but seconds ticked by. 5, 10, 15. Angel didn't resurface. Panic seized me. I tore off my shoes and jacket, preparing to jump in after him. Before I could move, Angel exploded from the water, covered head to toe in filthy marsh muck, screaming at me to get us out of there immediately. I hauled him into the kayak and we paddled like our lives depended on it, because maybe they did. Angel was shaking. Violent tremors that had nothing to do with the cold water. He kept looking back over his shoulder, eyes wide with animal terror, like something might surge from the depths at any moment. Once we'd put enough distance between us and that spot, I demanded answers. What the hell happened down there? Angel's voice shook. Something grabbed my ankle, yanked me under. He struggled to describe the sensation. Not a hand, he insisted. Not a tentacle or teeth either. Just something that wrapped around his ankle with crushing strength. Something that didn't feel like anything he'd ever encountered before. Under the surface, whatever had him tried dragging him away from where we'd been fishing. Angel fought with everything he had, kicking and thrashing until he finally broke free from its grip. We headed back to the boat launch, phone forgotten and irrelevant. Angel barely spoke the entire ride. I kept trying to rationalize what happened. Maybe a big catfish, an alligator gar, something explainable. But I hadn't felt it. My theories meant nothing against the memory seared into Angel's mind. He kept insisting it didn't feel like any fish or animal he'd ever touched. The way he described it, the manic fear in his eyes, started infecting me too. What was down there in that marsh? My mind wandered to dark places. I've fished those waters for years without incident. Research online turned up nothing conclusive. Part of me wants to return to that exact spot, to discover what lurks beneath the surface. But I'm not eager to satisfy that curiosity anytime soon. What I can tell you is this. Every time I've been marsh fishing since then, there's this feeling, this presence, an unease that shouldn't exist in something I've loved my entire life. Something's down there in those marshes, and now I know it's hungry. Story 3. This happened 2 months ago, but it plays in my mind like a horror movie stuck on repeat. The usual crew, me, Kat, Nick, and Megan, were looking for weekend plans when Nick mentioned the reservoir near Megan's house. We'd been there countless times. It was our spot, our secret place that felt like it belonged to us alone. Nick and I wanted to fish. The reservoir was stocked with bass and we're both obsessed. Kat and Megan planned to drink by the water's edge. Maybe swim if they felt brave enough. Megan lives way out in the countryside, and the reservoir sits about 10 minutes away by car, followed by a short hike through dense woods. Technically, it's county property. The no trespassing signs posted every few yards along the chain link fence make that abundantly clear. But Megan had cut through that fence ages ago. We laughed about it every visit, joking about our perfect hidden spot that nobody else knew about. The reservoir itself is small. Thick woods on 3 sides, a narrow access road on the 4th. Crystal clear water and a little sandy area we called the beach. It really was beautiful. Secluded enough that we could blast music and be rowdy without disturbing anyone. Or so we thought. The sun was setting as we squeezed through Megan's fence hole. Nick and I set up fishing gear while the girls spread a blanket and started drinking. The vibe was perfect, especially since I'd been crushing on Megan, and Nick had eyes for Kat. As the girls debated swimming, Kat suddenly pointed down the bank. "Do you guys see that?" We all turned. A canoe sat wedged into some reeds near the water's edge, positioned awkwardly like it had just drifted there without being secured. The strange thing? We'd been to this reservoir dozens of times in the past year alone. None of us had ever seen a canoe here before. Nick and I are naturally curious. The canoe was close enough to investigate. The girls seemed more interested in their drinks and music, so they waved us off. The walk took maybe 3 minutes. As we got closer, dread began pooling in my stomach. This wasn't just an empty, abandoned canoe. Someone had been using it, recently. A fishing rod sat ready, line still dangling in the water. An open tackle box lay beside it, lures scattered like someone had been digging through it moments ago. There was a half-eaten sandwich wrapped in plastic on the seat. But the phone, that's what made my blood run cold. It sat on the main seat, locked, but with the flashlight still on. Illuminating nothing, just burning battery in an abandoned canoe. Who leaves their phone? I asked Nick, though I already knew the answer was no one. No one leaves their phone behind unless something terrible has happened. All the other stuff could be explained. Maybe they heard us coming, panicked about trespassing and fled. But a phone? You don't forget your phone no matter how scared you are. I looked at the canoe again, taking in all the details at once. The fishing rod mid-cast, the open tackle box, the sandwich with 1 bite taken, the glowing phone screen, and every cell in my body started screaming danger. Nick felt it too. I could see it in his face. "This is weird," he said, voice tight. There was still enough light to see anyone nearby. We scanned the shore, the woods, everywhere. Nobody. We headed back to the girls and explained what we'd found. The more I described it, the more wrong it felt. I kept looking back at that canoe, watching it drift gently back and forth in the water, and foreboding crawled up my spine like insects. We threw around theories, But nothing explained the phone. Nothing made sense. Kat spoke first. "I want to leave." Honestly, I agreed. We started gathering our stuff. Then Megan gasped, pointing across the reservoir. On the far shore, standing knee-deep in the water, was a person. Even in the dying light, I could see them clearly. They held something long, maybe a fishing rod, maybe a stick. But what froze my blood was their stillness. They weren't moving, just standing there, watching us. They'd been watching us the whole time. The creepiness of the abandoned canoe transformed into pure terror. Without speaking, we all understood. We needed to leave immediately. We grabbed our stuff and started toward the fence. Not quite running, but moving fast. Then came what I'd been dreading. The person started screaming, bellowing at us that we shouldn't be there, that we needed to get out. We were trying to get out, but they didn't care. Their voice was belligerent, unhinged. The way they kept screaming and cursing made them sound completely insane. Then something worse happened. I turned back just in time to see them drop whatever they'd been holding. They waded into deeper water. They were swimming across the reservoir. Toward us, I screamed for everyone to run. We sprinted to the fence, squeezing through Megan's hole as fast as we could. I was last, and as I crawled through, I heard splashing from the direction of the water. They were getting closer. We made it through and ran to the car, speeding away without looking back. For 20 minutes, we sat in Megan's driveway, trying to process what had just happened. Kat was practically in tears. Nick tried calming her, but he was shaken too. None of us understood. Was that person the canoe's owner? If so, why was the canoe on the opposite shore? Why were they standing in the water watching us? Or, and this thought kept circling back, had they done something to whoever owned that canoe? But as Megan pointed out, if they'd hurt someone, why would they chase us and draw attention? Kat wanted to call police, but what could we tell them? That we were trespassing and found an abandoned canoe? That someone yelled at us for being somewhere we shouldn't be? Not an option. It's been months now. We haven't returned to the reservoir. Part of me wants answers. Wants to know what happened to the canoe's owner, why that person was watching us, what they would have done if they'd caught us. But I haven't convinced anyone to go back with me. Maybe that's for the best, because sometimes I wake up at night remembering that figure standing motionless in the water, the way they'd been watching us in silence before we noticed them, the inhuman speed they showed swimming across that reservoir. And I wonder, were they the only one watching us that night? Or was there something else in those woods? Something that would explain why a person's phone, their food, their entire life sat abandoned in a canoe? I don't think I want to know the answer, but I know I'll never forget the question.